Welcome to the Developer Spotlight on the Full Dive Gaming Podcast. In the Developer Spotlight, we sit down with VR industry professionals. This week, we've got Jay and Lip here sitting down with Chase Hernandez and Evan Lampy from Steel Wool Studios, the makers of the new Hello Neighbor VR game Search and Rescue that's launching today. Thank you both for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, ditto. Very excited to be here. Let's dive in.
Hey, while we're saying thank you to everybody, we got to also thank our sponsor of the podcast, Asterion Products. They make great VR, AR headset stands, mats, headphone stands. Use code FULLDIVE10 on Amazon to save an extra 10% on their products. For our listeners who are joining us right now, who haven't really heard of Steel Wool Studios, or if they haven't heard of you guys, can you give us a little overview of who you are and what Steel Wool Studios has been up to lately?
Sure, yeah. Steel Wool was founded a little bit over 10 years ago. We were actually really early adopters of the kind of modern VR tech wave. Okay. I think at one point, actually, we were the only studio in California that had a VR headset. Wow. So we had people coming over and using it for the first time. Yeah, it was really cool. And at the time, we were a pretty small team, maybe less than 20 or so. But since COVID, we went fully remote. And so now we're able to hire people from all over the country, which has been really great. A while back, we were approached by TinyBuild to help bring the Hello Neighbor franchise into VR. And I mean, obviously, we jumped at that opportunity, right? We were big fans of Hello Neighbor 1 and Secret Neighbor. And, the idea of bringing that world into VR was just really exciting for us. So, I mean, a year or two later, here we are.
Awesome. So I'm curious, before we get into the big questions, you said your team used to be like less than 20. What's the team now?
Mm-hmm. We're closer to 100, maybe 90 or so.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
scaling up. Yep.
So going on with the questions here, my kids, I actually put them into this game last night and let them play it. And my 6-year-old actually played it for about half an hour or so. They were beyond stoked. They're still stoked that I'm actually talking to people who worked on one of their absolute favorite franchises. I know you guys have played the flat screen games. Can you kind of give us a comparison of how the VR version of this game compares to the flat screen and how you sort of took the ideas from the flat screen game and made it a full VR title?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the most important things to us was maintaining the feel of Hello Neighbor, which has not been in VR up to this point. Maintaining the feel of a traditionally flat game in a VR experience can be a challenge, right? As far as the scare factor is concerned, that one comes really easily in VR, right? Like the scale of things, being pursued by this gigantic gentleman with a wonderful mustache. That's the easy part, right? The hard part is making sure that it continues to maintain the hallmarks of the IP in a different medium that may not necessarily lend itself well to those different concepts, right? Things that we take for granted in non-VR games, things like force movements, cutscenes, things of that nature are in an entirely different approach when it comes to VR. The player has complete control of the camera. We have to be aware of things like, are we going to make players motion sick if we do X, Y, or Z thing? Even if it works for the narrative of the game, we have to be really creative about how we pursue these solutions. So when it comes to the biggest differences in the game, we're hoping that our players actually don't feel any. We're hoping that the experience in VR is natural enough due to the capabilities of the hardware, right? Being able to use your hands the way you want to, puzzle solving, observational storytelling, all of that stuff goes really well in VR. And then we tried a lot of new things to make sure that the game felt the way that the other Hello Neighbor games felt. It feels very sleuthy. It feels like we're telling a story. It feels like you're seeking out secrets without necessarily forcing the player to look at a certain thing or do something in a particular way to then create a certain outcome. So we have to be really thoughtful in every element of the design, not to mention the fact that this game is a non-linear puzzle solver, which is physics driven in VR. We had plenty of technical challenges to chew on as we went through it. So I think hopefully people don't notice that it's VR, right? They only feel the good things that VR introduces to the franchise, and it maintains the character of the IP without creating any of that dissonance.
Well, I will say, since you mentioned the puzzles there, I was getting huge amounts of Zelda vibes going through, like almost like the Zelda style dungeon puzzles, going through and all the things just clicking like, oh, where do I go next? Oh, wait, what's this over here? What's this thing? What does that do? Okay, that must do this thing, and figuring it all out.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's really high praise for us. I mean, that's obviously the experience we wanted to bring to this, is giving the sense of discovery and exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine, but I guess I should probably give a brief synopsis in case someone out there hasn't heard of the Hello Neighbor series. I mean, this was like worldwide viral sensation. Hello Neighbor, when I first saw it, kind of reminded me of like Disturbia or the Rear Window movies. You see from your house that your neighbor's up to no good, and it's up to you to kind of figure out out what's going on. And there's a much larger mystery behind all this, some missing kids and stuff. I don't want to spoil anything, but basically that was the series, how it felt. And now it's been brought into VR. But one of the twists, of course, your kids, you see something, something's wrong, but your kids. So who's going to believe you? So you have to go and figure this out and prove this yourself. Although I never actually played the original Hello Neighbor games, I remember watching like Jacksepticeye, Markiplier, like everybody was playing them at the time. Do you think after developing this game with your history with it, will people need to go play or have some history with the original games, or can they just jump into the VR game with no knowledge of Hello Neighbor?
So I've been watching some of the early streams, and gotta say, it's a blast to watch them. It's so much fun. And I think anyone who's interested in the game should go check those out, because they're really great, a representation of how much fun you can have in the game. Playing the other games, as far as that goes, I think first and foremost, I think we really wanted Search and Rescue to be a great standalone experience. We know that a lot of people are coming in fresh to the franchise on this game, so we wanted to make sure that those people had a fantastic time. But that being said, the game does narratively take place between Hello Neighbor 1 and 2. So fans who want to do the deep dive in the lore, we're there for that, right? People can go real deep into this game. There's a lot of hidden secrets, a lot to uncover, just like in 1 and 2.
I bet you that comment alone, there's going to be people listening to this that are going to know, this part of the timeline, there's like a million videos about Hello Neighbor history and all the backstory of all the things. And it's like, I can only imagine what the audience is going to go just wild to get that extra thing in there.
Yeah, I have to admit, this was my first Hello Neighbor game that I played. I played the VR game when I joined the company before I played any of the others. And one of the things that I think is most exciting about getting into this game and experiencing it in VR is that a little bit what I was saying before, right? It marries VR best practices with the spirit of the original franchise. So it works really great on its own. And then you get this enriched experience if you either go back retroactively and play the other games. I think it's going to drive you back into Search and Rescue to say, I think I remember that thing. Is that what I think it is? And you'll start to compile the story for yourself. So I think in its own right, it's a good entry into the series, especially if you're someone who is looking at this as a VR game and not necessarily a Hello Neighbor game. Maybe a next best step is to go in and check out the other Hello Neighbor games and start to piece the puzzle together, because there are things that we put in here specifically for those folks who play, as Evan was saying. So that was how I approached it. And it took me to those games and it gave me a new sense of enjoyment. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome. I will say, like, I was blown away to find out this game's coming out on the 25th, which is literally today, for Steam, Quest 2, and PSVR 2. And I know PSVR 1 is coming in a couple weeks, maybe a month or so. But how hard was it to get all these dates for this date and get that all figured out in basically three different headsets at once, essentially?
I think you can probably guess the answer to this question. This was an enormous technical challenge. When you consider the fact that Steam VR release isn't necessarily just one headset, right? It's a plethora of different headsets.
Yeah.
We're really talking about 6 headsets, give or take, right? That are being supported simultaneously. And these different headsets that we have a wide chasm of technical capabilities, right? So this was far and away the biggest development technical challenge that we had to go over. Maintaining parity of our critical game systems across this divide made us make decisions with incredible rigor. Right? If we were going to put something in the game, we had to be sure that it was going to be supported across all of our platforms so that the players would have a uniform experience. We didn't want any person on any headset having a different experience, a degraded experience, whatever. Obviously, the games do look different on the different SKUs. Some of them can support more robust functionality than others. But the gameplay, what the players experience across all the headsets is the same, right? And that was really, really important. It was a painful process at times. Even through our rigor, we tried to identify every point of failure. We couldn't do it. And it caused us to go back and do a lot of work that we didn't anticipate. So there were some more painful times. Just as a small example, our primary conveyance for what is climbable in the game. Climbing is a huge part of the game, right? And puzzle solving aspect. Our conveyance for that is a yellow material, right? The climbable objects in the game are yellow, right? It's just a visual language that we use to talk to our players. And one of the really easy things for us to do to make sure that that language was consistent across every climbing puzzle in the game was to throw a decal on an object. So we have these very unique climbing puzzles at points in the game that don't utilize assets that are used anywhere else in the game. And our only way to show the player where to go is this yellow color. And so putting a decal on it made it really easy, but not every platform could run decals when we got into our QA portion of the game. So a huge critical system for player conveyance died on the vine instantly. And we had to go back and re-architect all of those bespoke assets for these wild climbing sections so that we could have that color yellow on there and maintain that consistent player experience. So it was a challenge for sure, but I think the audience that we get to reach by shipping it on all of these titles is going to give us a community, I think, across all of the different headsets that get to enjoy the same experience together, and they get to share stories about the things that they learned and the secrets they found without being constrained by the headset that it's.
So I got a question for both of you to follow up that then. And you can not answer this if you don't want to, but what is your favorite headset to play this game on?
Oh boy. Well, I dev on a Rift S just because I have about 6 or so headsets in this office of different types and amounts and whatever, dev kits and other things. But I use the Rift S. It's simple and take it on, take it off all the time easily. Don't have to worry about charging it or anything like that. So I gotta say Rift S is the way to go for me.
Classic.
Nice.
Classic, yep.
For my part, it is going to have to be the Quest 2 with the link cable. I've been into VR for a really long time. I have my own Oculus Rift with the 3 sensors. I know it seems like probably caveman tech at this point, but I tested a lot of the game on that setup in my last place. And it was my favorite until I found out you didn't have to have the sensors and you didn't have to lose hand tracking all the time because your body was covering your controllers. So it was the Quest 2 for me, certainly the MVP. Plus, I can test the Quest 2 standalone with the same headset.
That's what gets me. It's just simple get in, get out kind of thing.
I got rid of my Rift S a while back, and I've kind of always regretted that because as much as I love other headsets and the link cables and the problems that come with it, the Rift S just was so easy. It was always ready to put on. I'm curious, though, while we're on the topic, PSVR 2, did you use the headset haptics in it? I didn't get to try it on that one.
So we didn't use the headset haptics for PSVR 2. One of the things that I was talking about just a little bit ago was player comfort. And one of the things that is native to a lot of games of this genre is the jump scare. When you get captured by the neighbor, there is what we call forced movement, right? And this is one of those high zones for discomfort in the player base. Anytime you force a movement that the player doesn't make, it messes with your equilibrium, right? It makes you feel sick and get motion sickness. So one of the things that we didn't necessarily want to complicate in our game was adding this additional set of motion to these forced movement areas. But yeah, it's definitely something we've looked into, and it likely has a place in the game, but not in this.
Makes sense. Even as we were talking here just before we came on, Hello Neighbor has been a series that's been enjoyed of people of all ages, from full-grown adults to very young kids. And I saw that you got a 10 plus rating on the Oculus store. I also saw in research there was tons of forums. Is Hello Neighbor okay for kids? What age of kids can play? So how do you feel about the 10 plus rating you got, and overall how many kids will probably get in and try this game?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that's a fair rating. I think anyone who's played Hello Neighbor knows that there's some darker themes hidden underneath the surface, this very fantastical world with kind of creepy undertones. And I think the experience in VR definitely takes the tension to the next level. The neighbor himself in VR is super intimidating, and the jump scares are pretty visceral. But that being said, I think, like we were saying before, I think kids take to the VR medium a lot more naturally than older people do. So they might have a different experience with that and be more comfortable there than older folks. And I think, I don't want to give too much away, but I think in some parts of the game, especially later, we definitely drift into kind of like cosmic horror territory as we get a little bit more surreal and things get a little bit ratcheted up.
I was playing it in my garage, and I came up to have lunch with my wife, and she's like, "Why did I hear screaming earlier?" And I was like, I forgot. I haven't played a game with that bad of a jump scare in a while. And it's not even just the jump scares, but like you're turning, you're thinking you're totally fine, and then all of a sudden you almost feel it weirdly in VR when you get grabbed. And yeah, I definitely yelled a couple times and surprised myself when I did.
That is awesome to hear. One of the things that I think a lot of developers probably grow a thick skin around is the novelty of your game, right? The things that really make it shine. And it's really great to hear that you had that experience. I vividly recall playing through sections of the game as we went through development to make sure that everything was looking the right way, everything was performing how we wanted it to, and getting genuinely frightened by this neighbor in these circumstances. It just comes out of nowhere and it gets you, and I love to hear that coming from you.
So I'm curious, for people that have played the non-VR version that are all into the VR version, what mechanics did you take from the flat version of the game and incorporate them into VR? And was that a huge challenge for you to guys do that?
So yeah, I think to really cut to the heart of it, the mechanics that we took into at least the core gameplay loop were centered around puzzling, right? I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the game at its heart is a non-linear puzzle solve. If you play through this game one way the first time, you don't have to play through it that way the second time, and you can still get through to the end of the game. So at the heart of the Hello Neighbor franchise is that sort of onus on the player to figure out what's going on without necessarily being told. I think a lot of games today and a lot of players today are used to wayfinder system, navigation, things that tell you where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do at any given time in the game. So you never feel alienated, you never feel like you're lost. You can just always make progress. Hello Neighbor, down to its roots, even in Hello Neighbor 1, relied on the player to figure things out, right? And that is one of the feelings that I think we've done a really good job of capturing. There's some help that we do give the player, and I think largely speaking, it is unobtrusive. It helps the player understand and pick up sessions if maybe they put it down for a month and they don't remember exactly what they're doing. But we are by no means telling the player, here's where you go now that you've got X or Y, right? We're relying on you to use your observational skills, understand the layout of the house, understand what the neighbor is doing, and then react to it, right? As if you were in a real space. And that was really important to us to make sure that we preserve sort of the sanctity of the franchise. So in my opinion, I think that's the big one. And then obviously, you know, the neighbor is another very important part of this. Making your singular antagonist feel like he is a threat is a big ask. Especially in VR, it'd be all too easy to say he's always on top of you. He is always this scary looming threat, but we wanted to maintain the levity of the franchise. It's not all about being, you know, having the tension ratcheted up to 10 all the time. So we give the player room to explore. We give them the whimsy of the franchise as well. And I think that also keeps it in the realm of, you know, we're talking about the 10 plus rating. It keeps it in the realm of, we're not trying to make sure everyone feels like they're on the edge of their seat all the time. We're allowing players to have this organic experience, have a bit of fun with the scares, right? But also have it maintain that sort of integrity of, we're not taking it too seriously, and you can actually have fun with the neighbor, right? Part of this game and part of the fun that I have with it, having played it so many times, is I love messing with the neighbor. He reacts to everything you do. I love to leave him little things to find. I like to take his stuff. I like to see how long I can keep him distracted from whatever it is he was trying to do. And that is one of the things that's going to make this just a little bit different than some of the others in the franchise, is really getting to engage with him like he's a real person and you're actually. There's a lot we did to maintain it. And then, you know, we put our own creative spin on some of the things that maybe haven't been present in the franchise in the past without going too far outside the bounds of what we know.
I will say, I get crazy about tutorials in VR, and I was a little bit worried at the very start of the game when it's telling me, this is how you do this thing, this is how you do this thing, this is how you do this thing. And I couldn't be happier when it just said, okay, now figure it all out for yourself. Play the game. This is what playing a game is. I don't want you to just point me in the direction. Let me figure it out. And it felt so much more fun to do that. And again, I had a 6-year-old play this game, and he didn't need me to tell him how to play the game. He was progressing on his own. So that should say right there that you figured the right balance of how to teach people how to play the game while letting them play the game for themselves, you know?
Yeah, awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, we always have this sort of debate when it comes to times to tutorialize VR mechanics. You know, we know that not everyone's super experienced with the medium. I mean, even I remember our first games that we ever made in VR, we'd put people on the headset and they'd ask, how do I turn? How do I look around? And it's like,
turn
use
your
your head. Yeah. And they're like, oh my God, it's happening. And so it's like, okay, well, so what's the balance? I mean, some people slip right into it. Other people really need like, wait, do I press a button to move? Or finding that spot, especially in the beginning of the game, is a little tricky. But once people get their sea legs under them, we really want to take the training wheels off and say like, okay, well now go ahead and explore, like figure out, can you do this? Well, why don't you try?
Yeah, I love that. I think that in the beginning, it was enough. I will say I got a little confused at first, very beginning in the tutorial. I got to like the window and it told me like turn around, basically was what it was telling me, but it showed a thumbstick and showed it going backwards. And I thought that was like telling me look down at something. And so then I realized, oh, there's like a quick turn function. But it's tough to convey to people, even with all the experience in VR sometimes, exactly what they're trying to do. So the tutorial is there in the beginning to get you the basic mechanics, and then it's up to you to kind of learn.
Yeah, just a little studio insight. We constantly have conversations about this. There are folks in the studio who are diehard, absolutely 100% against any sort of tutorialization, any sort of UI in a VR game. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. The medium itself lends itself to that exploration, right? It says you're in here, see what you can do. But at the same time, the entire section of the tutorial that we've been talking about so far takes place in an area that we call Nikki's room. And it is specifically the place where we tell you how to use the controls so that we never have to talk about it. We have you execute every single action that exists in the game in this area so that we don't ever have to tread that territory again. It is a hotly contested topic because for folks who have played almost any VR game before, you wouldn't need it. Right? I'm certain everyone on this chat is thinking to themselves, well, I could have figured it out, right? And that's very, very true. But we also want to make sure that folks who are new to the franchise, folks who are new to VR, whatever the case may be, have an equal chance of success. So it's a constant debate because we haven't found the right answer. There's no universal way to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing. So we're hoping that we've struck the right balance here, and that's we've hit that sort of like gold mine of this is exactly where it needs to be, and it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is there just hasn't been the time yet in the medium to establish design conventions for user experience. I mean, even first-person shooter console games didn't have a unified control scheme until like Call of Duty 4, with like L1 to aim, R1 to shoot kind of thing. That wasn't even a thing up until that point. And even before then, some people were using movement on the right stick and look on the left stick, and other people had them flipped. And so what the right way to do it is sort of arbitrary in a way, but once everyone kind of does the same thing and the industry starts moving in the same direction, it starts being easier to rely on your players being tutorialized, not just by your game, but by playing other games that are similar to yours.
Completely agree with that fact. I was thinking exactly the same thing, and I've been thinking that for a long time. Yeah,
it's a concept that's come up on the podcast a lot. It goes by the term gaming literacy, and it's like the concept of does it make sense that whenever anyone picks up any video game, they should expect that pushing up on a stick means forward, or will some people who have never been gamers have no idea what to do with that control in their hands? And for VR, it's tricky, but we're kind of getting to where most controllers look the same. But I have to imagine part of the reason PSVR 1 is going to be a little later of a launch is because those controllers were a nightmare.
Yeah, you have the Move controller, and then you also have the glow stick controllers.
It's a mess. I'm excited this game is out now. It's $30. I believe that's across all platforms unless people pre-ordered it. There was a little bit less. How many hours of gameplay can they expect for that?
The thing that I'll say about this is it was our intention to put out a full and robust game when we created Search and Rescue. It's a true sandbox puzzler game. And so honestly, it's loaded with lots of different interactions, different interplays between the characters. I've mentioned this probably 3 times already, but the nonlinear problem solving is definitely an aspect that we really leaned into. I myself, even in the last couple of months, have said these words. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Now look at this path is open, right? There's a lot to chew on here. And so for a player who's great at puzzle games, someone who's maybe a Hello Neighbor veteran, if you're really, really good at it and you're really trying to get through it as quickly as possible, I think there's a solid 4 hours there of I know exactly where I'm going and exactly what to do and what I'm supposed to be looking for, everything that's important. But honestly, it's likely that players will spend far more time than that in this game. Like I said, it's really fun to pull pranks on the neighbor. It's really fun to figure out what the different paths are. And we've talked about this too. We don't tell you where to go or what to do. We let you loose. We give you just enough information to be dangerous, and we say, go have fun, right? So unless you're really, really trying to power through it, I think you're going to get a good amount of time out of this game. And then if you want to play through it again to see the different paths, I think there's a little bit extra there too. So it's really dependent upon the player. But I will also share this one fact because I'm very, very proud of this. We have played through the game lots and lots. And our speed record time for anyone who wants to beat it is 43 minutes. So just throwing the gauntlet down right now, 43 minutes. If you best that time, let us know.
That is impressive. There's something I was curious about. I was thinking, because I know the original Hello Neighbor series, a big part of it was the AI. And you can tell the neighbor he's got, he thinks he sees things that are out of place. He's like, why is this here? There seems to be an element to that. But part of that AI in the original was like, if you went in through a window, he would trap that window the next time you came back. I'm not super far in the game. Is that a part of this game, or because of the way it plays with multiple characters, did you have to make that different?
Yeah, I'd say that design convention is sort of, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it doesn't fit as well into the multiple player swapping core mechanic. I think over time, by playing the game, you sort of trap yourself in these interesting ways, and it's sort of cooperating between these two characters. And oh, this character's way over there. How do I get that character over here? And it's all these things. And the neighbor does dynamically evolve his pathing and his behavior over time as you unlock new spaces, as you get down into the basement, as you get into his backyard. So, he's always around. And so learning how to manipulate the neighbor is really kind of the core of that dynamic. Yeah.
It's a little more subtle now. It's not so
Correct.
obvious. Yeah.
I will also say that in the interest of, again, just maintaining that sort of like narrative integrity, the neighbor does react to things that you do. As you move through the game, you may take certain actions that do call him over to you, that make him investigate what you're up to. So it's not an exact analog to what we're talking about here, but I think we've done a good job of making sure that where we can preserve that sort of vision, we have. So I think, again, it's all about making the right decisions for the actual game experience and the player. In this version of the game, I think this is the right way to handle it.
I know you guys mentioned, okay, you can replay this game multiple times and have a different experience, but is there any thought or talks of doing a second Hello Neighbor VR game?
As of yet, no talks, nothing, no insights to share on this front. But, the Hello Neighbor, especially in VR, it captures the sensation of being a kid in your neighbor's, like your creepy neighbor's house, right? And it's really unique in VR in all the ways that we've already talked about, right? But one thing that we haven't yet mentioned is VR can force a perspective, right? So in the previous Hello Neighbor games, seeing the neighbor is a very curated experience, right? It is meant to convey a certain attitude. In this one, we put you in the shoes of a child. So you will never be as tall as the neighbor. You will never have this dissociation you have in a non-VR game where it's like the neighbor's on the screen. The neighbor is there with you, right? The entire time. You can hear him, you can feel his presence. There's a palpable tension there. The fear factor in this game is just naturally amped up, right? And so I know that we've talked about this. It's not the nature of the game to crank up that tension and make sure that players feel uncomfortable all the time. But I think maybe you all have experienced this. I definitely did myself. I think that this game works really well in VR because of everything that VR has to offer. Just the moments that need tension happen. There's no question of whether or not you are going to be scared by this neighbor at certain junctions. You definitely are. It's going to happen. And so if additional games came out of Hello Neighbor Search and Rescue, because there's a lot of player enjoyment, there's a lot of player demand, I'd be super happy.
Well, the art style just translates to VR, and especially, the Quest 2 limitations so well. I was like, this looks like what I think the game looks like. This is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more. Coming into the franchise, there was a bit of debate on which direction to kind of push the art style to kind of evolve it from its earliest incarnations into what it is now. And I'm really happy with where we ended up going in terms of technical limitations, you're totally right that it lends itself to VR and to Quest, since it's not about the sort of highly detailed polygonal models, or like transparency or long draw distances or anything like that. It really is more of this sort of toy box makeshift kind of world where no two lines are parallel. There aren't very many right angles almost at all. Even the walls have a little jank to them, and something like that comes across so well in the kind of volumetric sense that you get in VR. You could very easily tell that like, whoa, I'm in a space that's not uniform. It's not normal. Like the floor's a little wonky. This thing's a little moving. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, it really feels like you're in that universe. It adds a little to the uneasiness, though, I noticed, like what you're saying, how the walls are a little off and there's these moments it almost feels kind of dreamlike. But I was really impressed with the way it felt like you were in those games.
That's great to hear. One of the things that I know we're incredibly proud of in the game is the visual fidelity on the Quest specifically. I think we all surprised ourselves a little bit with how far we were able to push the visuals, the graphical density of the game, specifically when you're in the house, in the environments overall, being able to pack it full of meaningful interactions and objects was really, really important to us. So I think, obviously, people will notice a visual difference on, say, PCVR, any Steam headset, PSVR 2. There are capabilities that we can leverage there that aren't necessarily available on the Quest. But as far as the Quest title goes, it is, to this day, I look at it and I still am impressed with how far we were able to push it. And that means a good deal to our studio. It looks fantastic.
So I have to ask now, because I thought about it when I looked at the store page. You are supporting PlayStation VR 1, but you are not supporting the Oculus Quest 1. Is there any background to why you made that decision?
So to be quite honest, we want to appeal to the broadest amount of players, and that's where we see the player base going towards, right? The Quest 1 is not necessarily something we wanted to specifically exclude, but in terms of sort of the technical complexities that are introduced as you support this array of devices, we have to be very choosy with where we spend our efforts. And so we obviously want to make it available to where the most folks have the headsets, right? So that definitely factored into our decision-making process. And as much as I'd love to sit here and tell you that we want to take the time to support every single device, unfortunately, that wasn't on the cards this time around.
Tough choices. Yeah. I was playing this game pre-release, so I was playing it on early edition, thanks to Meta and the developers here. And I was really surprised, though, because from the trailer and the way things looked, I expected when you get like a crowbar in the game, you could flip that crowbar all around and it would fly all over the place. But more like titles like Bone Lab and others that have physics, that crowbar had weight to it. I needed to get two hands on it sometimes to do what I was trying to do. And of course, with that came a little bit of jankiness or frustrations when it came to like trying to use an object and it got stuck on something else or my hand got stuck in place. How have you felt about the development process trying to incorporate this much physics? And is it difficult? Does it add a lot more to the game? What leads a developer down this path?
It is difficult. When the second we start talking about physics constraints and how those are correlated to device performance and what that means in terms of player experience, it's enough to make your head spin a little bit. There's so many interconnected systems. All of these things rely on the capabilities of the hardware. And especially when you're using a physics-based system like we are, there's a high probability that there are things that you can make the game do that we've never seen. All these interactions depend on a variety of different factors. There's essentially infinite permutations of what you can make the game do based on the capabilities that you have. So it creates a lot of complexity. Adding on to that, the fact that we went for a nonlinear problem-solving game, we wanted the world to feel real. We wanted objects to have weight. We wanted everything to feel like you were actually handling it, so that it felt grounded. It felt like the neighbor was someone to be worried about, right? Not just a pathing AI. We wanted to give your actions consequences. And so there are things you can do in the game, like you can start opening a door by grabbing the doorknob and then pulling it open a little, and you can put your hand behind it and then just push it the rest of the way open. That's the level of realism that we were looking to achieve. And that was the onus behind our decision to use a physics-based system. We wanted everything to feel weight and that it was doing things. So a large driver behind why we decided to go in that direction in the first place was so that we could achieve that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this game is it's intimate in a way. It's not a sprawling open landscape that you can do anything. And the world is the house, right? The world is the neighbor's house. Mastering the neighbor's house was so important to us that the game felt real. The walls have thicknesses. If you find a hole in a wall, you can pass an object through the wall and it stays there. Like you don't recognize how many games, have giant spaces between rooms that are supposed to be right next to each other. We designed the house as a real house in the ways that we could. It's this Willy Wonka, teetering tower of a house, but it works. And so getting physics interactions that supported that feeling was so important to us. And absolutely, it was a total nightmare technically in all the ways that Chase mentioned. But I'm sure our QA is shaking their fists at us. But no, I think it actually came out really well.
Yeah, and to add on to our incredibly badass QA team, there are things you can do in a physics-based system that are sort of like the only limit is your imagination. Just the other day, I got a video from our QA lead that said, "Is this trailer worthy?" And somebody grabs the blue or teal key from the backyard barbecue. They're walking towards the fence. They flip the key in their hand, grab it. They toss it 10 feet in front of them. It goes right into the lock. And then they just scroll up to the lock, unlock it, and push the door open. It was amazing. These are the sorts of interactions that you get from a fully physics-driven system. And it sort of adds to that theme that we've been talking about of replayability. It's like, what are the crazy things you can do? For instance, we've had little internal contests about who can get a fuse into the fuse box from the furthest distance away, right? Like there's lots of fun little mini games that you can create for yourself. There's lots of room to play in a system like this. So that's sort of a cool byproduct of using this incredibly
The whole opening area felt like it could just be a little playground. You could just spend an hour in just messing with the baseball bat stuff, the slingshot. I even saw, I didn't do this in the game, but I saw in the trailer you can wave to the magnifying glass guy, and he actually waves back. I was like, oh, that's some attention to detail.
Well, it's funny because when I originally watched this, I think it was Jacksepticeye who had supported the development, and so he got an early demo. And I remember at that point, there were some weird glitches where one time the neighbor pushed their way through a door or something like that. And so I actually found some of these glitches to feel really true to the early original series. And I know some other people may not feel that way, but I thought it was very true to that. And something that was also true to that is that the kids aren't all talking throughout the game. There's not constant talking to each other. I was just curious. I think a lot of the listeners are going to wonder, was that a tough call to make? And how do you feel that the people are going to respond to a game where there's not really that conversation that you might expect with all these different people?
I think for us, that was a reference to Secret Neighbor, how the kids are in that game. They have their own personalities that are very clear and evident, but they don't necessarily need to have a full-fledged conversation. And then also in our game, you get to play as each of those kids. So you take on their roles. If they were speaking in a way that you didn't respond to, that might affect your immersion.
I think it's also important to note that you are sneaking into your creepy neighbor's house, and so a lot of excessive talking would probably feel a little disingenuous, right? We're in these closets I don't think he saw me. That would be, people start to ask themselves the question, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, there was a point I yelled and he looked at me and then I was like, oh, did he hear me? And that freaked me out, though. I still don't know if there was anything built in for that, but it really seemed like he heard me and then I was being quiet.
As much as I'd love to take credit for that.
No, it's not. Okay.
So we've both played the game. We've had a great time checking it out and a great time chatting with you guys. Before we let you go, is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys want to talk about, or let us know any future updates or anything you just haven't talked about the game yet? No,
I think I'm just really excited for fans to check out the game and see the Hello Neighbor world in VR for the first time. I think it really comes to life. I don't want to give away anything, like I said before, but I think there's a lot more to this game than I think most people expect. And I can't wait for the fans to check it out and uncover all the secrets.
Awesome. Well, they're definitely going to check out some of those live streams if they're on the fence at all. But I definitely think if you're a Hello Neighbor fan and you have a VR headset, this is It's one you can't skip out on.
Yeah, it really takes you into the universe of it. And of course, if you're out there, we're going to have links in the description, the show notes, so that if you need to find this game quickly, maybe even a referral link to help you save a little bit on it, who knows. But again, Chase, Evan, thank you both so much for coming out today.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us.
And if you're out there listening to the podcast, remember, you can come over here on YouTube and you can see some of these graphics, see what we've been talking about what to expect from this game. But if you're here on YouTube and you need us more on the go, we're on every major podcast platform, including Audible, which I just learned is like kind of a big deal. I had no idea, but we are there too. So thank you for being here. And if you're thinking about VR, maybe it's time to get Hello Neighbor and dive on in.